Okay, so I think we got it.
Yep, I think we're recording.
Awesome. So, once again, I want to welcome everybody to the Coaching for Life podcast. And today we have a special treat because we are live on video. We'll be posting this video and we will also be posting on the Anchor FM podcast as well. So we have a very special guest with us today. His name is Deva Madhava Das, and he is the community director at the Harmony Collective, which is a Bhakti Yoga focused campus here in Ypsilanti, Michigan. And we'll get into a little bit more about what that term means and what it is that Deva does there. But first of all, we just want to welcome you. Thank you for being on the podcast and thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you for having me, Tara. It's exciting to be here. I always enjoy our conversation, so I'm looking forward to this one.
Same here, definitely. And I'll get a chance at some point, hopefully during the discussion, to kind of just share how I met everybody over at the Harmony Collective and how we came to know each other, where we could do this interview today. But first of all, let's talk a little bit about, tell us a little bit about your title over at the Harmony Collective and about your name, which is also significant. We'll get a little bit into, how you came to know more about Krishna consciousness, and we'll share that with the audience as well.
Sure, yeah. It's always awkward for me to kind of title myself because I'm just one of the first people to develop the project, so I'm kind of like the default in charge. So then you have to give yourself a title. So I call myself president or CEO or something silly like that. My role is really, as I see it in our community, which has developed in a beautiful organic way over the years since about 2014, is really just to encourage others in their service. I'm not particularly skilled at anything, but I am able to see the skills that others have and kind of encourage them in that way. So that's how I like to think of myself, in that director role of helping people do the things that they're best at, and in a way that will make them happy and support others. So I don't know if community director is the right title, but nobody seems too upset when they hear me say that. So okay. I'm okay with it. And the name I share, I mean, if you ask my dad, my name is Devin. He'll still call me that. So my given name was Devin O'Rourke. And then when I got initiated in this practice of Bhakti Yoga, my guru, my spiritual master, gave me this name, Deva Madhava Das. And I was teasing you before, the Das is the important part, so don't leave that out. That means servant in Sanskrit. And that's kind of the whole mood of Bhakti Yoga, is to learn to live into ourself as servants of ultimately the absolute truth, which Deva Madhava means the sweet Lord. So the whole name means servant of the sweet Lord. And I try to remember that unfortunately, a lot of people think God is somebody who's there to punish them and make their life harder than it has to be. And my experience has been different since I've started practicing Bhakti, especially. And I find that if I can help other people see the sweetness that's there in a relationship of service to the absolute, then that's where happiness really exists for everybody. And it's also available for everybody.
That's very nice. I really like how you explain that. So you were saying then that your given name is Devin O'Rourke.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned that there was I believe you termed it a spiritual master that gave you another name or a new name that had a meaning to it that was different from the original name. So I definitely want to get into that. Let's start though first back towards the beginning, the earlier years. Tell us a little bit about who, your childhood and who you were and what your influencers were and what you kind of aspired to be at that time. And then how you came to this path that you're on now.
Well, definitely shout out to mom and dad. And my name that my spiritual master gave me, Deva, that's what everyone calls me basically. It's an homage, so to speak, to my name that my parents gave me, Deva. There's only a few letters difference. So my own guru, he likes to do that, to recognize that our parents and our previous life, so to speak, before we came into the practice, it's not insignificant or useless or something to be ashamed of, or any other idea that some people might have. It's actually also part of God's plan for us. And God has put us in certain particular situations to bring out certain things and give us certain insights. And so Krishna really hooked me up with amazing parents. And I've always said that. And so I'm happy to say it today, because it happens to be the anniversary of my mom passing, actually, 2 years ago now. And so it's nice to be able to think a little bit about her and appreciate her today. My mom was a teacher, and she became a teacher because she wanted to spend more time with my sister and I. So she started volunteering at our elementary school. And then once we got a little older, she was just hooked. She couldn't let go of those kiddos there, and she wanted to keep teaching. And she can speak Spanish. So at that time, I grew up in North Carolina. There was this big influx of Latinx people, and the parents basically had almost no English, and their children also, as a result, had a hard time. And so my mom, although not educated in it, could speak Spanish fluently. And so she just became the kind of rescue aide that would go around to the classrooms and speak to the parents every day when they came in with questions and challenges. And she just became an institution at that school. But she got paid nothing because she had no degree. She had no master's in English as second language education, etc. But that's what she was doing. So I saw this example in my mom's life of living a life of service, even if it means not getting paid. In North Carolina, unfortunately, it's like 48 on the list of states in America for paying their teachers. So as an assistant teacher, you make essentially less than minimum wage, because they give you benefits. So they call that as a part of your salary. So I saw her basically slaving away, but being happy at heart because she was doing something that made her satisfied. And then my father was a very dutiful and upstanding dad, partly because he didn't have a dad growing up. His dad wasn't around. And so from the early age of like 8, he had to take care of his 2 sisters and his mom as kind of the man of the family. So he always expected a lot from me. And I didn't really understand why until later on. I could look back and understand how his life as a child had influenced his upbringing. But however it worked out, he demanded a lot of me. And that was for my benefit. I think that I learned to expect a lot of myself and to have a sense of responsibility to those around me, that how I carry myself is going to affect them. And if I carry myself in a good way, it's going to be good for others and also good for me. So that was mom and dad. And then I grew up we didn't have much money. So we grew up in a low income area. And that was part of what sent me on my kind of spiritual trip that set the tone for where I am today, I guess you could say, is that I saw my family had the same amount of money or lack thereof. We didn't have a nice car. Our house was okay. But the kids in my neighborhood, who were mostly Black and Mexican, they were all on a very different trajectory in life. And I didn't really understand why. Socioeconomically, we're basically in the same situation, but from the quality of life standpoint and how, especially as we were getting older, I could just see they were all going in a different direction than I was. And it always put this question in my heart, like, why is that they're having these difficult experiences and I'm not? And that question and how to create a wholesome experience for everybody in the world was always this like inner motivation for me ever since like 7 or 8 years old, when I started to recognize those discrepancies. And so in college, I studied political science, thinking that politics was the way to solve those issues. And then I started appreciating after some study that it's not done much for many people, although it's distracted many people for a long time. It's not the root of the issue. It's not the root of the situation. It's kind of addressing, if you have a runny nose and a cough and a sore throat and a headache, you might take some Tylenol and you might blow your nose and you might rub some Vicks on your chest. but it's not getting at the virus.
That's
It's
right.
not getting at the disease. And so I started to look at all the other kind of social efforts, politics, etc. I could see how they're addressing the different symptoms, but more and more I was wanting to know what's the disease and how do we, what addresses that? Does anybody even know? And that's kind of what brought me to this bhakti path. When I started reading the Bhagavad Gita, especially as it's translated by Bhaktivedanta Swami. He has the most popular translation around the world. And he really just gets straight to it that everybody in this world is confused about their real identity as a soul. And so then in that confusion, they hurt themselves and others by misidentifying with the body and investing in racism, classism, sexism, all the symptoms of abuse we see today and do deserve some attention on like the immediate level. But without addressing that root issue, you're always going to continue to have that stuffy nose, that sore throat, that headache in the social body, because the virus isn't getting addressed. And real spiritual activity and development addresses that disease. So when I found my spiritual master, in him is somebody that I feel is he's a paragon. He's an emblem of that possibility in people's lives. He's lived that life of sacrifice and service. And so having a relationship with him inspires me to, in my own small way, try to be that for others.
That's really powerful what you're sharing. And I kind of honed in on that thought process of social symptoms.
Yeah.
And really at the root cause. And that's a really powerful thing at such an early age to kind of zero in on and become aware of how basically our system, so to speak, speaking about specifically here in the US, because I'm not fully aware of what the systems are everywhere else, but I do have a general idea. As far as globally, there are certain things that are set up. Some people tend to have better success, being able to work towards their dreams and goals, and other people come up against more challenges. We have those social issues, we have systemic racism, we have all kinds of ailments inside of the social
body.
Yeah. So this is very powerful, the point you're bringing up. Tell us a little bit more about, first of all, who your either your spiritual master or what you learned about the spiritual master who wrote the purports or the write-ups in the Bhagavad Gita as it is. What his name is, what his thought processes were on these topics, and how that plays into the belief system of Bhakti Yoga.
Sure, yeah. The spiritual master of my guru, his name is, affectionately his followers call him Prabhupada, which means the master at whose feet sit many masters. So the master of masters, so to speak. And in the culture of yoga, there's a recognition that anyone who wants to receive spiritual knowledge has to have a guru. It's kind of like if I have an empty glass and I want that glass to be filled with water so that I can drink and have my thirst quenched, then that empty glass has to naturally put itself in a subordinate position. It has to go underneath the source of water, whether it's a pitcher or a faucet, whatever the source might be, that glass has to go under, even underwater, in order to get, if there's a river and I dip my glass in, I have to go under the water to get the water out. So that culture of every guru also has to have a guru. So it's nice that you asked. My spiritual master is not some self-created guy. He didn't just write a book and decide now I'm your guru and buy my course for $1,500 and I can make you a perfect soul. He had a spiritual master, and that person we call Prabhupada, or A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. And he was given an instruction by his guru because he was educated in kind of the Western world. He grew up in British India. His guru said, you're a smart and intelligent person. Bring this understanding of the Gita that is there in the Bhakti tradition to the West, because it's been lost in the world now. And it's become kind of if you imagine the whole world was once this big, nice lake of spiritual understanding, it's now become a dried up little puddle. And India is one of the last little places where the puddle's still a little wet. There's still a little water there to be had. Not the only place, but it's one of those pockets where there's still some essence of the original understandings that wisdom cultures have had for a long time. So his spiritual master said, take this information and go west with it and try to print books and share it as much as possible. So that's what Prabhupada did. He got on a boat at the age of 70. Everyone told him he was crazy and he's going to die. And sure enough, he had 2 heart attacks on the way over, because the Atlantic Ocean is a difficult thing to cross at any age, but especially at 70. It was just a cargo freighter. It wasn't even like, it wasn't on a Carnival cruise ship or something like that. It was just, he basically hitched a ride on this cargo freighter. Some sympathetic person said, yeah, you can come with me. I can't really take care of you. You have to take care of yourself, but you can come with me. So he gets to America, no money, no job, no connection. But somehow by his faith in that instruction from his spiritual teacher, he begins to share this understanding. And it was just at the time when America was also coming to terms with all the hypocrisy of the World War II generation and the baby boomers and the wealth that they'd started to enjoy, and all the inconsistencies in society around Jim Crow laws and socioeconomic conditions in other parts of the world that America was benefiting from, all this suffering that is coming on the backs of a few people's happiness here in America. And so there was that hippie movement and the civil rights actions that were happening at that era. And that's just when Krishna put Prabhupada over in the Lower East Side of New York City, right when all of these people and places were becoming bastions of social change. And so he came in with this message and said, okay, you want change and you recognize things are bad. And that's wonderful. That's intelligent on your part. It's good that you've come out of the kind of stupor of enjoyment and not just taken the sugar and said, you know, that's sweet enough, I don't need any medicine. The kind of intoxication that comes with that happiness. He said, it's good you've recognized that. But then if you think that the solution is just another adjustment of the material stuff, right? Instead of the pile of sand being over here, we need to move the pile of sand over there, and then everything's going to change. Yeah, that's your confusion. He said, whether you drink water from a gold cup or a copper cup or a paper cup, it's still just water. The quality of the water doesn't change. So these social actions, if the end result or the end goal is still just nicer stuff for everybody, you haven't really solved the issue. So begin to look to your spiritual identity, understand what characterizes that, and then you'll be able to have a sober understanding of what to do in this material space, in our worldly consequence, and how to affect some positive change there, but not before you see the real goal of spiritual development. So he characterized that as direct service to God, directly communing in our relationship with God. And that's what bhakti means. Kind of like watering the root of the tree. If you water the root of the tree, then all of the other leaves get what they need. But if you go up to each one of those leaves and try to water them, then first of all, it doesn't work because the water just rolls right off. And it's also very hard to get to every leaf individually. You can't without some, rocket pack or a ladder or something. You'd have such a hard time, and it won't work anyway. So that's something like what people are trying to do today. And Prabhupada characterizes that they see a problem. They see there's water that's needed, but they don't understand the system of how that water can actually make it to all of us, how all of us can really be benefited by social development. That social development has to be anchored in spiritual truth. Otherwise, it's just going to be fruitless.
That is a very beautiful analogy with the tree there, because to me, it kind of brings out this thought that there is an actual way to accomplish the goal that so many want to achieve. It's that all these different methods that we've been utilizing socially and politically that just haven't had the results that everybody has benefited from, that there is a way to accomplish that, but the focus needs to shift. And usually that's how it is when there's a big grand issue. Usually the answer is a lot more simple than what it looks like. It's just
Right.
depending on what you're focused at. So that's really a powerful thought process just in itself. So now with this information, you are now armed with some really amazing tools,
Mm.
obviously. So how did you start to put that to work in your personal life
Yeah.
with regard to this process of bhakti yoga and what you're doing with the Harmony Collective?
That's a fun question. I'll start with a little story of my own coming up here to Detroit, because I'd graduated college and I was having this like existential feeling, like now what? You know, I don't want to go work for the man. I'd already started to have a sense like, yeah, the system as it is really benefiting from exploiting other people. I don't really want to be a part of that. I don't really want to like become dependent on having to exist on the suffering of others. And I had this feeling in my heart to run away to Detroit, because somehow I was starting to hear about Detroit, and it was 2010. So Detroit was in a rough place. Most of Detroit still is in a rough place, but the Bud Light commercial, as I like to call it, which is like that little corridor of Woodward, they've made that into a little like Bud Light commercial, and everything looks hunky dory there now. But even that was still boarded up and blown out in 2010. It was really like a desolate place. And I show up in Detroit, and just 2 days, and I don't know why, no job, no family, no friends, no home. I was homeless when I showed up. But 2 days in, I see that at the Kobo Center, which is where they have the auto show, there's a social justice forum happening. And the National Social Justice Forum is something that takes place once a year, where all of these like charitable organizations come together around one city and have like a conference. It's like Comic-Con, but for do-gooder organizations. And so I thought, oh my gosh, wow, the universe has brought me here so that I can meet my tribe. I'm going to meet my team, and I'm going to be able to, figure out what is my contribution that I can make to help the world, because all these people want to help the world, and that's why they're here. So somehow the universe brought me here, and I felt really like excited and edified. But I went around each of those tables, like I talked to everybody there for 3 days. And everyone, the children are the problem, and we have to help them. The women are having problems, we have to help them. The immigrants are having problems, the bees, the whales, like everybody was talking about all the different problems. But nobody was talking about that central solution. Nobody was raising the question of, all right, if there's all these problems in the body, what's the virus? And that put me on this, like that just solidified it for me. Nothing on the material side is going to solve the issue. I have to find something transcendent to these different concerns. And that faith in that possibility is what then gave me, only a few days later, when I got that spiritual knowledge, I was given a book called The Science of Self-Realization. When I was given that, I had such a need for it in my heart. I was ready to listen to those solutions being offered and accept them as possibilities. Wow. So I share that just to say, this is the first thing that anybody who's serious about their spiritual development has to take on. You really have to accept that it's not your family, your political affiliation, the business you work with, the education you got at whatever university. None of those things in and of themselves are going to satisfy your soul. The solution is necessarily outside of all those things, because what the soul is looking for is something eternal, and all those things are temporary. Whatever degree you got in your last life, when you were born a baby, you still had to go through kindergarten. So that stuff comes and goes, comes and goes. But what the soul develops in terms of its own understanding of itself, that can never be taken away. So I really was in a moment in my life where I was ready to accept that. So then when I read the teachings of Prabhupada, I started applying them with that consideration. And what were the teachings? That the confusion we have in our life today comes from vibration. It comes from, I didn't know I was a white boy born with privilege, and that these Black people are less than me, or that these Democrats are right and the Republicans are wrong, or that these Chinese are trying to take over the planet. None of these things were inherent in my psyche. They were all things that were forced on me by vibration, by hearing them told to me. They're all stories that I've been given. The antidote, just like when I get bit by a snake, then the antidote is that same poison, but adjusted a little bit to now heal me instead of harm me. The antidote is also vibration, spiritual sound vibration. And if I can expose my psyche to vibration which excites my soul, then I'll be able to shed those other identities naturally. I don't need to think that I'm a Michigander or a North Carolinian or an American or a man or a woman or rich or poor. I won't need to identify with those things because I have a better identity to satisfy me. I have a sense of self that's stronger than that. So what are those spiritual sound vibration sources? The Bhakti Yoga practice emphasizes two: the holy name of God and the scripture. That to expose ourselves to those sound vibrations is the antidote to all the other people who are trying to make us think all kinds of other things about what we should be doing. So the holy name, every tradition has its name of God that it likes to call to. We like to call to Krishna, and Krishna in Sanskrit means the most beautiful. So it's a nice reminder that we're all looking for beauty. We're all attracted by an attractive person. So why not call out to the all attractive person? Why not connect to the most attractive person? And then no celebrity, no athlete can ever stand in front of God. So if we can see that form of the Lord, the all attractive, then we won't get distracted by the other things here. So we call out to Krishna. But Prabhupada, the teacher of my teacher, who I was mentioning earlier, he said, God doesn't mind what name you call, as long as you're calling for them. It's like a mom. You're a mom, so you know.
Yeah.
And when your baby really cries out, you're not waiting for your baby to say your name correctly. You're not waiting for the pronunciation to be right, and then you'll come. You just hear that sincere call of the child, that distress in your baby's voice, and then your mom instinct kicks in, and like wherever you are, you just come running because your baby's in trouble. And you also have that mom instinct where you know when your baby is trying, just making a fuss. They're trying to trick you into coming over, and don't bother yet. They're not ready. They don't need me, actually. They're just making a little bit of a fuss. So Prabhupada says that God knows the sincerity of the soul when that call is real and when that call is just something pretend. And so whether you say Yahweh or Christ or Krishna or Allah, whatever the call, whatever the name being used, the importance is the sincerity of the call. And just like a baby, we got to cry for mom every day. Every day the baby cries, and multiple times a day. So every day you should cry out the name of God. And we do something, it's called japa. I have my beads here with me. You'll see Hare Krishna is walking around with these bead bags, and inside we have these prayer beads. And those beads are just, on each bead we say the Hare Krishna mantra once, and then we go to the next bead, and we kind of keep track. How often am I calling out to God? Just in the same way, I'll keep track of how much weight I'm lifting and how many reps I'm doing, because that builds up my physical body. I was an athlete for a long time, so I understand the value of that. Same thing, my spiritual body, to strengthen it. I keep track of how often I'm chanting God's name and really spending that time intentionally trying to commune with them. And then the other side, we mentioned the scripture. The scripture is powerful as a spiritual vibration, but also it helps our intellect. It gives our mind something in the tool belt to understand how to behave in ways that are different from the ways that the world has told us to behave. Because the ways of the world get us caught up in the world, and the ways of scripture get us out of the world. So if we can follow those examples of the great ones, whether it's Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, who's hearing from God, Krishna, whether it's Christ, who's showing by his own example how to carry ourselves, we can see that there's a different way they do things. And when we learn ourselves to do those, to be in those ways in our very practical life, not running away to the woods, but in our day-to-day, with our children, with our spouse, with our coworkers, with our neighbors, we learn to live that way, then there's a satisfaction and safety that comes into our heart. And again, we don't get distracted or confused by the different allurements that other worldly things are throwing out there.
Wow. So you mentioned a couple of really interesting, I mean, everything you said was very interesting, but a couple of points. One, I really enjoyed, once again, the example of using parents as an example when
Yeah.
they're dealing with children, and
Mm.
how that natural affection most times is there between the mother and the child, or the father and the child, and that they're not waiting for a specific set of circumstances for the child to call out a certain way in order to respond in a loving manner. It's just natural, it's
Yeah.
instinct. And that if that is so for us, why shouldn't it be so for the Lord, or for
That's
our
right.
creator source, or for God, however an individual is referring? So I think that was a very loving analogy.
Mm.
And then also, you mentioned something about our soul. So it sounds like when you're speaking about the soul, you are referencing something that is not just one with the physical body, but something that is more than. So tell the audience a little bit about the beliefs with regard to Bhakti Yoga and the soul, and also this thought process of the soul having more than one experience
Mm.
in possibly a human form or some other form, so that way the listeners understand more about that.
Sure. The understanding within all Eastern traditions, and it's most clearly laid out in the yoga texts in Bhagavad Gita, is that the soul is eternal. The soul has a very specific quality. The self, our true self, is eternal. And that is the value of the experience we're having right now in this material situation, because the fundamental quality of everything that we've experienced in this realm is that it's temporary. We have to admit that. If we're a little sober, we have to admit that it's temporary, right?
Right.
I'm eating my favorite food, but I can only have like 3 slices of pizza, maybe 4 slices. But if I have 5 slices, then I don't feel good. And 6 slices, I'm in trouble. I'm getting sick now. So even in a simple way, we can see that things in this realm have their end. They have a threshold, whether it's the stuff I'm trying to enjoy, I'm eating, I'm making money, or the relationships I have. I'm a mom until my baby grows up and they're gone now, and I'm not so much a mom anymore. And one day I'll pass away, and then am I still a mom to that same child? How does that work? So in the yoga text, the implication is that the soul is eternal, but it's going through all of these different temporary bodies. And each of those temporary bodies are opportunities to receive lessons about the nature of the self. And that main lesson, the first lesson to learn, is that I'm eternal. Everything around me is temporary. All the stuff around me, the house I'm in, the car I drive, the body I have, all that is going to come to an end. But still, there's some part of me inside of me that's not comfortable with that. There's a part of me that gets angry and upset when things come to an end. We become sad. It's difficult to accept. And the yoga texts say the reason that it's difficult to accept that loss and that change, that temporariness of everything around us, is because the soul is eternal. The soul wants something that is forever. And so that's the value of all this pain and suffering, which we've all gone through. I mentioned, my mom died just 2 years ago of cancer. That was sucked. It was very hard, but it was a deep lesson for me in which part of my mom am I really connecting to when I say I love you? Is it the curly hair and the glasses she wears and the funny outfits that she puts on when she goes to school? My sister and I were she was sending me a meme of 90s teachers and like the jean,
Yeah.
like the full length jean dress that was like the
Yeah,
official
yeah, the
uniform of,
jumper thing.
yeah, the
Yeah,
jumper. And
yeah.
she sent me a picture of a couple of those, and I was like, I think mom had the one on the left. Like literally, mom had exactly one of those. So okay, that's my mom on one level, but that's not my mom on the eternal level. My mom in her spiritual identity is not wearing jean jumpers forever.
Yes.
The mom that I really want to remember and keep with me is the one that served those little children for decades after her own children had left, and for practically no money, just because she wanted to, from the best place of her heart. And that's who each of us are meant to recognize in ourselves and others. As we move through all these temporary situations, it forces us to seek that which is real, that which is eternal. And so that's why we talk about reincarnation as something that is helpful in that experience, is that usually it takes more than one life for it all to click, and for the soul to come around and accept that God is there and that I want a relationship with them. So being very loving and kind, God has given us infinite opportunities to come around to the love that's there for us to receive. And even those that don't, sometimes people say, I don't believe in reincarnation. I said, okay, maybe next life.
What do they say when you say that?
Their face just gets very frustrated. You know, some people laugh. Some people do laugh, like they, you know, it's a little uncomfortable for them, but they get it. Other people are like, you know, there's no comeback for that. So they get a little flustered. But it's just,
Wow.
many people, if you think about reincarnation, it's intimidating just because you don't want to have to deal with the repercussions of this life. People, this philosophy of YOLO, you only live once. This is, practically speaking, it's only ever been there within the last like 60 years of Western culture. And that's because Western culture is such an embarrassing, ugly thing. We're ashamed of it. We don't want to have to be held to account for what we've done here and are doing and continuing to do. So then we come up with a philosophy that says, well, actually, you only live once, and you won't have to be held account for it. And don't worry, just go for it. Even if it's screwing over so many other people and you're enjoying on the backs of so many others suffering, that's all right. That's our so-called philosophy these days. But early Christianity, Taoism, Buddhism, wherever you go, you'll find this recognition that you're going to have multiple lives. You're meant to be learning lessons through those. And the ultimate experience is one of complete surrender to service. As Christ is such, he's the common example of this. He didn't care how he was treated. He didn't care what inconvenience it brought him. He was just an emblem of service to God. So that's the culture of bhakti. Bhakti means service to God. And the yoga, the intention of developing that capacity. And we need a couple lives because it's a tall order. So that's why that understanding is there.
Wow. So this is really interesting once again, because we're learning more about what our purpose is here. And that's one of the number one questions that people really ask all the time is, why am I here? What am I supposed to do? So inside of Bhakti Yoga, there is an understanding of the soul having a purpose of coming to this ultimate knowledge that has to do with connection with God consciousness. That's what I'm picking up. And that we have multiple opportunities to grow to achieve this. If we don't do it now, we have an opportunity later.
Totally.
So this might be kind of a silly question. You spoke about reincarnation. What about people reincarnating as a rock or a piece, like a piece of paper, or, you know, just that thought of, you know, coming back? Is it limited to certain things, or?
It is limited to other things that are alive.
Okay. Oh, okay. That's
the piece of paper is not alive.
Okay. So
again,
I couldn't come back like as this acorn here.
Well, that is alive. So that has seeds inside, and the seeds inside are containing a soul. That's what distinguishes them. What's even still today, it's not clear for science. We speak of science in the secular way. It's still not clear for science how to define life. Life is an enigma still, as much as it's been studied and there's some understanding of how it develops. The kind of instigation for life is still unclear from a secular point of view. And so we continue to hold on to this idea that life comes from life, that the soul present in a tree is what's making that tree grow. And when the soul's no longer present, that's what stops the tree from growing. What's the difference between a living tree and a dead tree? All the stuff is still there. All the xylem and phloem and the roots and the leaves, it's all still present. And yet there's something that's not going on that was going on before. So we attribute that vibrance to the soul. And the soul in the human form is getting a unique opportunity. And this is something this is why I was attracted to yogic texts. I grew up in the South, as I mentioned, North Carolina. So I grew up around like a pretty rigid Christian culture, Southern Baptist. And that culture is very narrow in its conception of things. And I have a lot of mean things I used to say about it. But these days I'm like forgiving of them. I'm just like, all right, that's what you need. But that's not the whole picture. And it's good that you're going to God, but there's other nuances to the situation that are not given there. So what attracted me to the Bhagavad Gita was how specific the details become about the situation for the soul. Because like the Southern Baptist folks, they just tell me, well, to have sex before marriage is a sin. And I'm, all right, well, why? Well, because we said so. No, thank you. It looks fun, so I'm just going to go do it. But then in the Bhagavad Gita, it's very clearly laid out why sin is a sin. What's wrong with it is that sin is anything which distracts the soul from relating to its own identity. Sin is anything that distracts me. And it's not that it's bad, it's just a distraction from what's real.
Okay.
Sin, literally, the Latin word means without. So if I live a life of sin, if I live a life devoid of spiritual development through my choices, then God is going to put me, he's made a system where I'm going to go to a place where I don't have to be bothered with human life anymore. Right? If I just want to have sex all day, then the pigeons have like 30 or 40 partners daily. That's what pigeons do. So if that's the kind of life I want to live, why do I have to bother with like children and child support and a mortgage and a car payment just to have sex? Just go be a pigeon. So that's the system of reincarnation.
Wow.
Is that based on my choices, I'll be given a mode of life that allows me to live out my desires. And so it's scary today because most people are really just living like animals. If we look at their human existence and how they're using it, they might be driving a car and going to a job and getting a degree from a fancy university, but their whole mentality is just let me eat good, let me sleep good, let me have somebody pretty to sleep with, and let me protect my ability to do that. And what's really the difference between that and the bird flying around from tree to tree? Prabhupada, that guru, one of my teachers, he said, the dog is running on 4 legs and you're running on 4 wheels. What's the difference? The sugarcoating of technology doesn't actually improve the intention of the heart. The intention of the heart is what has to be improved for the quality of life to really develop. As I mentioned earlier, that example, whether you're drinking water from a paper cup or a copper cup or a gold cup, it's still just water. The vessel doesn't affect the quality of that which is being drunk. So we have to examine our lives and see, am I living mostly like an animal, just thinking about my day-to-day existence? Or am I allowing myself to think about higher things? If we live that animal existence, then we become animals, we become plants, we go down. But if we live for higher experiences, then even if in our human life we haven't done it perfect yet, then we'll get the chance to continue that development in this human form, which allows for much more choice than the animal species.
Wow. So what I'm hearing is that, being a human, actually, sometimes we look at that as, but really it's a very powerful position to be in with regard to having an opportunity to really grow towards that knowledge of God consciousness, to be able to grow towards with source.
Exactly.
That actually sounds like it's a little bit better than maybe what we're thinking sometimes, huh?
Yeah, I remember. So we have blessed food that we distribute. We call it prashadam, and the understanding is that by coming in contact with forms directly related to God, then it kind of washes you, it cleanses you of your sin, it cleanses you of that confusion. And so I was at a festival and we were giving people free prasad. We were giving people free food that had been given as an offering to God first. And one man's dog was there. And I asked him first, I said, can I give a little bit of this to your dog? And he said, well, what'll it do? And I said, it'll make sure he gets a human form in his next life. And then the guy looked down at his dog, he looked back at me and he said, I'm not sure if I want that.
That's pretty bad.
I know, right? Like, he's one of those folks that think, well, it's better to be the dog or the bird or the fish because it looks so
Wow.
easy. They
Wow.
do have it easy in the sense that their life is very simple. They're just focused on their existence in a very basic way. And so human life, especially today, the world is so harassed and crazy. It's not easy. The struggle is real. And the confusion is so thick. It's so difficult to make sense of what actually matters. But again, when we start to expose ourselves to spiritual vibration from whatever tradition, but if we really become dedicated to it, I'll use that word religious. Religious has a negative connotation, but religious just means responsible. I'm going to do it whether I feel like it or not. Most people just religiously go to work and take care of their children and whatever else. But we should also be dedicated in that way to our spiritual development. And you'll start to feel that clarity come into your life through that chanting of God's name and through that regular hearing of the scripture, which gives us practical understandings of how to live in a better way.
Okay, sorry about that. I had like a call came in and it muted everything out.
Okay.
So yeah, but I caught what you were saying. Definitely the term religious has been utilized for a certain thought process,
Yeah.
and don't forget the actual meaning of that terminology means to just religiously or consistently be doing something, just constantly.
Yeah, re and lig. I mean, to break the Latin down, lig, like ligaments in our legs or our joints that bind things. Re, the prefix mean again, to redo something. So to again link us, to again bind us. And that's the word yoga in Sanskrit literally means the same thing. It means to reconnect or unify.
Right.
So religion, yoga, the process is the same, recognizing that the soul has become separated from its real identity, and we want to re-establish that connection.
Yes, that's very important. I'm really glad you brought out that root meaning of that word to help people understand that, because a lot of times when that word comes out, people shut down
That's right. Yeah.
because they've had some very real negative experiences.
I'm in
And
that camp
yeah,
too. As I said,
yeah. And so they're just like, you know what? I don't want to talk about religion. I don't want to talk about spirituality.
yeah.
And honestly, I think that because we're getting close to the end of our time, there's so much there's so much juiciness in here for us to touch on. We really need to do at least another interview so that we can go deeper into some of these other things that you just touched the surface of. And guys, for those first time coming to the podcast, or maybe even to the podcast before, just so that way I explain in case you haven't ever run into what people will refer to on the street as a Hare Krishna, which is basically the mantra.
That's right.
Is
The
so
prayer.
that the prayer, yeah. So, and you'll hear them on the street, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So that's what you're learning about today. If you've ever wanted to know more about, who those people are and what beliefs are, what Bhakti Yoga is, and how that relates to some of the ancient texts that we see, Vedic texts. So those are things going back to India and the Far East that are very old, some of them 5,000 years old, some of them more than 5,000 years old.
Yeah.
If you want to understand more about that, that is who we are speaking with today. Deva Madhava has, brought his life into a channel and a frequency with this focus, with this practice. And he is running an actual, or directing, I should say, an actual center that focuses on these things. So the people that are there, and I've been there personally, it's always a very lovely experience. Doesn't matter what mood you're in when you come there, you always feel very light of spirit and uplifted
That's sweet.
after there. So definitely spending time with those devotees of Bhakti Yoga has had a very positive experience for me personally. So if people would like to know more about this movement, or maybe they've come across Bhagavad Gita as it is, or maybe
Yeah.
they people doing the Hare Krishna chant or doing kirtan, somewhere in their local community or book distribution, how can they reach out to the community and learn more about
Sure. Well, we have our website. It is 2021, so you can jump on there and contact us. It's theharmonycollective.org. You can also find us on Facebook and message us there. My email, if anyone likes to contact me personally, is Deva, DEVA, at theharmonycollective.org. So collective is spelled with two L's. That's the only tricky part. So we're happy to connect, and I'd like to just emphasize that although our practice, we call ourselves Bhakti Yogis, really we also see anybody who's sincere in their own spiritual pursuit is in their own way a Bhakti Yogi, where the destination is the same and the process to get there is also the same. Some of the, we all wear clothes, whatever part of the world you go to, universally clothes are accepted, right? So clothes have their utility and their purpose, and those utilities and purposes are generally the same in any culture. The colors might be different, the shape might be different, but the purpose is the same. So we feel that way about other paths, other religions, is that they have their essence that they're providing people, and that's their value. And again, just my own attraction to bhakti as it's outlined in the Gita is because it was so specific. It's so clear there. There's no mixing of motivations. There's no uncertainty. And it's in accordance with all the other, like I was just discussing it with a friend, and they're from the Native American tradition. And what attracted them to bhakti as it's given in the Bhagavad Gita is that it kind of fulfilled all the question marks in their head around what they learned in Native American culture, because the understandings there are kind of vague and general. And what's given in the Gita is quite specific, but it harmonizes, it just basically completes the understandings from other cultures. So that's what I found uplifting. And in that way, we at the Harmony Collective, that's why we named ourselves that. We love to have people from other communities and traditions come and bring what they've realized in their practices to help us benefit in ours. So don't be shy if you feel like you're from another, family, so to speak. You'll be welcome to come have dinner at our table, and we'll look forward to hearing your wisdom and stories.
I can vouch for that. I can vouch for it. I've done it. And they, as mentioned earlier, have the practice of offering prasad or offered meals that are offered to Krishna and then offered to the community as well. So you can join them for a meal. You can come for kirtan, right?
Yeah, that's right. On Wednesdays and Thursdays, we have our programs for the public, so to speak, so 6 to 8. And then there's always dinner that we serve, and some prayer and meditation, scripture discussion. So those are good times to come.
Those are wonderful. Yeah, it's an amazing experience if you want to just really just jump right in, come for kirtan, and stay for the meal after. Everything's always delicious.
Mm.
So we'll definitely post. I'll have you to just email me some, like the days and times or the links, basically.
For sure, yeah.
Website, and
That'd be
that
helpful.
way people out. Yeah. So we'll post all of that information here, folks, so that way you can learn more if you'd like to. I know personally, I was really excited to actually get a chance to, I was like, I just want to sit in the space and see what it's like. And it was very cool. And they have a farm and just, it's just awesome. Just a lot of beautiful work going on there that is beneficial not only to the community, but also to the planet as well.
Mm.
So we will definitely have you back, Deva, so we can go deeper into some of the other amazing things that are happening through the Harmony Collective, and we can talk more about, the soul's purpose and kind of just go a little bit deeper on the next one. How does that sound?
I love that. Always looking for an excuse to talk to you.
Awesome. I'm so glad. And I'm so glad you could be here with us today. And thank you for being a guest on the podcast. Really enjoyed the discussion. Everybody, that is the process for today. If you're interested in learning more, we'll post those links below. Just click on those and check them out. Also, of course, if you have any questions about the podcast or any questions about processes that were mentioned, you can always reach out to us at our website, which is coaching, the number 4, the word life.org. And you can go to the contact page and we will be happy to have one of our team members get back with you within 24 hours. So this is your girl Tara with Coaching for Life, our amazing guest, Deva Madhava Das. And I look forward to being back with you again, Deva, so that way we can have more discussion.
For sure.
And with our C4L family as well. Thank you and have a beautiful day, everybody.
Thank you, Tara.